Top 5 bits of church history that made me start to question my faith.
Hold on a second. Let me buckle up for this one. Here's hoping this is a banger.
Number 1, the Council of Nicea. If you're unfamiliar with it, go look it up. It doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. Basically, a bunch of dudes got together, took all the Christian writings that had previously been considered canon, and decided some of these are canon and some of them are not.
Yeah, this is inaccurate. Nicea didn't actually create the Bible or establish the canon. Nicea had more to do with settling matters of theology regarding rejecting the heresy of Arianism.
Wow, dude!
Affirming the deity of Christ and the doctrine of the Trinity. In fact, history tells us that before and after Nicea, Christians still disputed the biblical canon's boundaries. For example, even canonical lists from the pro-Nicene dudes like Cyril of Jerusalem and Athanasius of Alexandria show that they didn't see eye to eye on the inclusion of the Book of Revelation. The 27-book New Testament was first formally canonized during the councils of Hippo in 393 and Carthage 397 in North Africa. So it's actually later dudes who formalized the canon. That said, for centuries, Christians were largely in agreement on what books belonged and what books didn't. Most disagreements about canonical books concerned a relatively small amount of texts. For example, peripheral books like 2nd or 3rd John, Jude, 2nd Peter are contested books that made it into the Bible. If these books were missing from the New Testament, virtually nothing about the facts of Christian doctrine as we know it would be changed. Books that some Christians regarded as scripture that didn't make the cut were the Didache, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Apocalypse of Peter, the Epistle of Barnabas, and the Epistle of Clement. The latter were late 1st century or early 2nd century works. Many in the early church either questioned their authorship, had concerns over them being more recent, or regarded them as useful, but not on par with earlier apostolic writings. Interestingly enough, many of the books that didn't make it into the New Testament quote parts of the New Testament documents. For instance, Barnabas quotes Matthew with the phrase, "It is written," meaning that he seemed to think that it was on par with Scripture. Clement says, "Take up the epistle of that blessed apostle, Paul. He sent you a letter in the Spirit concerning himself." This indicates that he thought Paul's letter was divinely inspired.
Who said those dudes got to do this? Who said those dudes had any right? Those dudes. They said it.
Dude!
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Dude!
Here's the thing, though, as I hope you've seen so far, these dudes were being far from arbitrary. The church father Origen dude,
Bruh, look at this dude.
listed 27 of our New Testament books in an early 3rd century sermon. By the end of the 2nd century, the church father Irenaeus utilized a set of authoritative apostolic writings comprising of 20 of the eventual 27 books of the New Testament, including a specific listing of the widely accepted 4 Gospels. Written around the same time, the Muratorian Fragment is our earliest canonical list, and it affirms 22 of the 27 books of the New Testament. Also near the same time, Clement of Alexandria affirmed the 4 Gospels, the 13 letters of Paul, Hebrews, Acts, 1 Peter, 1st and 2nd John, Jude, and Revelation. Furthermore, Justin Martyr quotes all 4 of the Gospels and calls them memoirs of the apostles and said that they should be read in churches along with the Old Testament. Such a widespread affirmation of these books couldn't have happened overnight. It must have required some kind of predecessors.
Interestingly, this all happened way after Jesus died, and not one of those dudes had ever met the man.
Yes, they settled on the canon centuries after Jesus, but these dudes didn't just assemble in the big city to go make a Bible. The Bible had already come together long before. Papias tells us that the early church had received the Gospels of Mark and Matthew and valued them because of their apostolic status. Papias goes so far as to affirm that Mark received his information from Peter himself, a very ancient tradition of the church. Although Papias writes in 125 AD, he actually refers to an earlier time, around 90 AD, when he received this information from the elder, who many believe is John the Elder, one of Jesus' disciples. There's also Polycarp, who was born around 69 AD. His student Irenaeus tells us that he was a disciple of the Apostle John himself. In his letter to the Philippian church, Polycarp approvingly cites 17 out of our 27 New Testament documents. These include the Synoptic Gospels, Acts, 10 out of 13 of Paul's letters, Hebrews, 1 Peter, and 1st and 3rd John. Ignatius was also reportedly a student of John and quotes from the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Luke, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, Colossians, and 1 Thessalonians. Earlier still, we also know that in 2 Peter, Paul's letters are regarded as on par with the other scriptures, referring to the Old Testament. This refers to a collection of Paul's letters circulating throughout the churches that the author expected his audience to be familiar with. Then there's also the fact that 1 Timothy 5:18 quotes both Deuteronomy and the Gospel of Luke, and he calls them both scripture. Sure, the authorship of both of these biblical books are contested, but it shows us that the canon was coming into focus from very early times. The bottom line is that early Christianity was not some wide-open literary free-for-all where there is no agreement on much of anything. Instead, there was an agreed upon core that virtually no one disputed. The question of how we got our New Testament just isn't really a great reason to question your faith.